Now, if there's one thing Bethesda does really well with the Fallout series, it is world building. Pretty much everywhere you go, there are stories to uncover which might span a huge epic quest or be as simple as a body clutching something in its hand. Now, many of these stories end badly. I mean, we are in the post-apocalyptic wastelands after all, but when you look into the history of Fallout's iconic vaults, well, they have some of the most disturbing stories in the entire franchise. So come join me around the campfire today and let's talk about some vaults. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and this is Fallout ranking every vault from least to most horrifying. Number 31, Vault 88, never finished. Added into Fallout 4 as DLC, Vault 88 is easily the least screwed up of all of its vaults, and there's one main reason for this, and that was that it was never finished. Instead, this vault only has a main entrance, security, and reactor rooms. The entire purpose of this in gameplay is that it's designed to be used by the player as a settlement in Fallout 4, and that they can customize it as they see fit. God knows what the vault would have been used for if it was actually finished. Number 30, Vault 8, Recolonization Vault. Vault 8 is perhaps one of the most tamest on the entire list of vaults that have actually appeared in the franchise so far. Appearing only in Fallout 2, Vault 8 is a control vault, and as such the inhabitants weren't actually subjected to horrendous experimentation. Instead, Vault 8 was designed to open after 10 years with the aim of the population recolonizing the local area. The facility was equipped with a GECK or Garden of Eden creation kit, which the dwellers used when emerging from the vault to create Vault City. Number 29, Vault 114, testing rich people in impoverished conditions. Vault 114 is another unfinished vault which is present in Fallout 4. And while it's never specifically confirmed in the game whether it's true or not, it's widely believed that this vault was never actually inhabited as it was unfurnished by the time that the bombs dropped. You can still, however, find out what the vault's intended purpose was. In this case, the vault was designed to house rich and affluent citizens with the promise of extreme levels of luxury underground. In reality, though, this was a complete and utter lie, and the vault was nothing like what was promised, and Vault Tech presumably wanted to study what the residents would do when they were stripped of all of their luxuries that they had before the war. Chances are the results of this experiment would read, didn't go well. Number 28, Vault 68, 999 men and just one woman. Needless to say, the horrors here are pretty obvious. Not so nice. Number 27, Vault 69, 999 women and just one man. Needless to say, the horrors here also are pretty obvious. Seriously, forced procreation isn't cool no matter how many times you say the word snoo snoo. Number 26, Vault 76, Control Group Vault with the best and the brightest. Fallout 76 namesake vault, Vault 76, is lucky enough to be one of the 17 control vaults throughout America. As such, inhabitants weren't subjected to horrible experimentations. The actual residents of the vault were some of America's best. It housed students from the Vault Tech University, members of the military, and even the former chief of staff in the White House. The idea was that these best and brightest would emerge from the vault after 20 years with the aim of recolonizing the area. But with high levels of intelligence comes high levels of arrogance, and inside the vault, there were clashes between the dwellers. The Overseer implemented several awards for the dwellers to earn to appease this, including a Vault 76 World Cup and Best Dental Hygiene Award, which actually resulted in a fight. After 25 years, the vault was opened on Reclamation Day, thus unleashing the inhabitants upon the world and them not having a clue what they were getting themselves into as they had no contact from the outside world. Number 25, Vault 3, Water Leaks and Massacres. Found in the Mojave Wasteland in Fallout New Vegas, Vault 3 is perhaps quite tame by Fallout Vault standards. You see, Vault 3 was considered a control vault. That basically means that it was a normal vault made for the purpose that it was actually stated to its inhabitants. There were no planned experiments, and thus Vault 3 acted exactly as it should, as a nuclear fallout shelter. Even so, the fate of Vault 3 is still not particularly pleasant. Sometime in the 23rd century, the vault had a massive water leak, effectively cutting off the inhabitants from a significant portion of the vault and also damaging a large stockpile of supplies. This forced the inhabitants to open the doors of the vault and begin trading with the outside world. Just a few weeks later, the local bunch of crazies known as the Fiends cottoned on that there was a lovely little hideout just waiting for them to take, so stormed the place and brutally murdered all of the original inhabitants before claiming it for their own and using it as a prison. Oof. Number 24, Vault 13, stays closed for 200 years to study prolonged isolation. Appearing in both Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, on the surface, Vault 13 doesn't actually sound all that bad. There's no particularly horrible social experiment at work here, and the Vault had plenty of resources and even a GEX applied to them. Originally, this Vault was part of an experiment called the Societal Preservation Program, and was intended to keep the Vault sealed until the people inside were needed by the Enclave. The Fallout Bible, however, reveals that the Vault was also designed to remain closed for 200 years to study how prolonged isolation affected its inhabitants. Vault 13 also has the distinction of being home to the Vault Dweller, the original Fallout protagonist. They're sent out into the wasteland from the Vault after a malfunctioning water chip meant the Vault must be opened. Number 23, Vault 15, closed for 50 years with people with radically diverse ideologies. Vault 15, present in both Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, was primed and ready to explode into a powder keg of internal strife. However, despite Vault Tech purposefully filling the Vault full of people who were of massively different ideologies and cultures, for the most part, they actually lived together pretty well for some time. The only major event happened when there was some form of disagreement between the dwellers, and lots of the dwellers decided to open the door, steal all of the equipment inside, including a very valuable GEC unit, and travel off to make their own lives in different communities. A small group stayed behind until the Vault was finally raided by local bandits, and it was since left abandoned. Number 22, Vault 79, stores gold from America's bullion repository. First appearing in Fallout 76, Vault 79 was never intended to actually be used as a nuclear fallout shelter. Instead, Vault 79 housed the entire gold bullion haul of the United States government, as it was secretly moved from Fort Knox before the bombs dropped in 2077. The idea was that the gold would be used to rebuild society as and when it was needed, but of course, that never happened. The Vault was guarded by several soldiers in the build-up to the nukes hitting, and they ended up being some of the Vault's inhabitants. Several years later, a Secret Service agent named Shorty, who was in the Vault, staged a mutiny and killed many of the soldiers inside. What happened after that is unknown, but it's believed that many of the other soldiers ended up killing themselves. Number 21, Vault 17, raided by Unity and the inhabitants turned into super mutants. Vault 17 hasn't actually physically appeared in the series yet, but it is mentioned in Fallout New Vegas. As such, there's very little actually known about the Vault and its original stated purpose, but what we do know is that the Vault lasted until 2154, at which time it was raided by Unity. At this point, all of the inhabitants were captured and assumingly were subjected to the forced evolutionary virus and were all turned into super mutants. Not a nice outcome. Number 20, Vault 21, studying evolution of society by resolving conflict with gambling. Lady Luck was really smiling down on the inhabitants of New Vegas's Vault 21. Not only did these Vault dwellers manage to live successfully underground without killing each other, but they also managed to fulfill the quota of their social experiments as well. In true Vegas fashion, Vault 21 was all about the gambling. The Vault itself was spacious with plenty of resources, but any dispute or conflict was to be solved by gambling. The winner then earned the right to solve the dispute in a manner that they saw fit. In 2274, Mr. House, leader of New Vegas, managed to contact the Vault's inhabitants. He asked them to be part of the city's rebuild, and this caused conflict between the residents as some wanted to go and others didn't. In true Vault 21 fashion, this dispute was solved by a lengthy game of blackjack. The ones who wanted to leave won, the Vault was cleared out, and it was turned into a hotel by Mr. House. Number 19, Vault 101, to stay closed forever. Home to the Lone Wanderer, our protagonist from Fallout 3, Vault 101 had a directive from Vault Tech to remain closed forever. The idea was that the Vault would never be exposed to the outside world, allowing Vault Tech to study how its residents would survive and eventually have to resort to inbreeding in order to keep the population going. In the early days of the Vault, the Overseer helped to maintain the Vault by being closed by telling everyone that the world above was completely destroyed and that there was absolutely no hope of returning to the surface. In reality, however, the Vault door was actually opened several times. In fact, the Lone Wanderer and his father James actually came from outside the Vault and left it again at a later time. In 2258, the Vault also became more of a dictatorship, as the Vault's overseer declared a police state designed to practice isolation. This leads to the Lone Wanderer fighting against the system and wanting to leave the Vault in order to pursue their father. Number 18, Vault 94, the goodness of humanity. Now, Vault 94 appears in Fallout 76, and its original purpose sounds all sugar and rainbows. The Vault was to be populated by non-violent groups who would assumingly live together in peace and harmony. The Vault had compact spaces for living quarters, but large-sized communal areas to ensure that the group remained together, and it had plenty of resources, but no weaponry. But as with many Vaults in Fallout, this wasn't all that was happening. The non-violent dwellers were being studied to see how they would adapt to life in a post-apocalyptic world, and that they were told to open the vault door to outside people if they needed help, purely so that Vault Tech could see how they would go against their belief system in order to protect themselves. A year after being sealed in 2077, the vault was opened so that Vault ambassadors could travel to the wasteland and ask people to come back to the vault. Many of these were brutally murdered by the local population. For the rest of the vault dwellers, they were all murdered when an ambassador brought back residents of Harper's Ferry. The new arrivals were extremely suspicious of the nice inhabitants and decided to just blow them all away and take the vault for themselves. Number 17, Vault 111. Population is unwittingly cryogenically frozen. Now, you'll definitely remember Vault 111 because it's one that you're forced to sprint inside and make it to just in the nick of time as the bombs drop in Fallout 4. On the surface, this vault was promised to be just a fallout shelter like you'd expect. It was to house a large number of residents from the local area of Sanctuary Hills, including the sole survivor, our protagonist, and their spouse and infant Sean. When they reach the vault, however, the family is placed inside chambers which claim to be for contamination, but in reality, these are cryogenic freezing pods, and the vault was constructed to study the effects of cryogenic freezing on unwitting dwellers. When frozen, the sole survivor also briefly thaws out, witnessing their spouse being brutally murdered before their son is stolen. They're then frozen for another period of time, finally waking up 200 years after the initial freezing process to find that their vault has been completely abandoned. Number 16, Vault 29, housing the children of rich parents. Only mentioned in Fallout 76 and meant to be released as part of an update that never actually happened, Vault 29 sounds like quite the nice proposition. It was designed to be a fallout shelter for kids of rich parents, but in reality, the vault was purposely designed to study what would happen if it was only populated by children. No member of this vault was to be aged over 16, their parents were redirected to other vaults when the bombs dropped, or adults allowed inside had bad health conditions that meant that they'd die very quickly. In the original plan, the children of the vault were to be looked after by robotic helpers who would bring them to maturity. In reality, Diana, a human brain connected to a computer, do not ask about that, hacked into the vault and closely followed the upbringing of all the children. She secretly also sent out a worker robot every year outside of the vault, which was pretending to check to see if the environment was safe for habitation. In reality, she was creating a settlement for the children called Twin Mothers, with the aim being to release them to it when it was completed. By 2253, the vault was emptied. The Twin Mothers settlement was established, and Diana is considered a god, and the vault is considered a holy place by its original dwellers. Number 15, Vault 81, researching diseases by exposing vault dwellers to them. When you wander into Vault 81 in Fallout 4, you'll be amazed to find that the vault actually still has its original inhabitants, and it's still functioning like it's meant to. But as is the case with Fallout regularly, there is definitely more to this vault than meets the eye. Turns out that this vault originally was created so scientists could try and find a cure for every single disease that affects humans. In order to do this, they created a vault to contain two sections, a single section with living quarters for normal inhabitants, and another secret vault populated by scientists that would then expose those humans to diseases and observe what happened. Due to the actions of the overseer, Dr. Olivet, this never actually happened though. 3 scientists turned up as planned when the bombs dropped, and the doctor went along with their plans for a while. When human testing was about to begin though, she deliberately sabotaged the system so the scientists couldn't release the diseases, then locked them away in a secret vault for the rest of their days. The rest of the vault's oblivious population then survived and prospered in the vault as they weren't being experimented on. Number 14, Vault 34, overstocked armory, overpopulation, and radiation. Now, what happens when you don't put enough living space into a vault, rely on recreational things such as swimming pools, and pack an armory to the gills with absolutely loads of weaponry? Well, for New Vegas's Vault 34, it meant riots, damage, and ghouls. The overabundance of guns in the vault's armory naturally led to a great emphasis on gun culture within the vault, but foreseeing problems between the dwellers and their access to weaponry, the overseer quickly took steps to remotely lock down the armory from their terminal. Now, that didn't sit very well with the inhabitants. Demanding access to the armory, they were refused by the overseer, so they started rioting and left the vault at some point in 2231. Due to the vault's lack of living space, it also suffered from overpopulation. When the rioters left, this made more space for the people, but overpopulation still took over again. The overseer then tried to force population control measures on the residents, and again, they didn't like this. In the ensuing turmoil, the vault was damaged extremely, with the annoyed dwellers damaging the reactor cooling vents, main computer systems, and the vault structure in general. The reactor couldn't be repaired, so it started leaking out heavy radiation into the vault, and the exit to the vault could no longer be unsealed. This led to the residents slowly being turned into feral ghouls and glowing ones. Number 13, Vault 12, studying radiation by not closing the door properly. Ideally, when you're in a nuclear fallout shelter, you'd want to keep the nuclear fallout, out. But Vault 12's inhabitants in the original Fallout weren't so lucky. Although the vault was filled with resources with every amenity in mind for the prospective vault dweller and fitted with advanced water purification systems, Vault Tech purposefully designed that the vault's door wouldn't close properly, meaning that the population was steadily exposed to extremely harmful levels of radiation. This massive dose of harmful rays killed a significant portion of the vault's inhabitants, and for those who survived, they turned into ghouls. On the plus side, after being ghoulified, the dwellers left the vault and founded the Necropolis Ghoul Settlement. Number 12. Vault 92. Musicians are controlled via white noise. Appearing in Fallout 3, Vault 92 was housed almost entirely by musicians. To cater for them and their musical talents, the vault was stocked full of everything musical that they could possibly need, including sound equipment, musical instruments, and recording gear. The stated purpose of the vault was to maintain the musical legacy of America in the wake of the bombs dropping. In reality, however, the vault was designed to use white noise to subliminally influence the musicians inside. The vault was equipped with several white noise generators made for just this purpose. The first experiments succeeded. Dwellers were placed into trance-like states, but the white noise was slowly damaging their minds. One of the musicians went completely insane, murdered 3 other people, and had to be shot dead. With the insane dweller showing increased strength and tolerance to damage, the experiments continued. The white noise slowly damaged the minds of more and more dwellers, and gradually more went insane. Some even tore other dwellers to pieces with their bare hands, and on top of that, the entire vault was built badly and started flooding with regular water leaks. Great. Number 11. Vault 96, full of frozen animals and genetic experimentation. The idea of Fallout 76's Vault 96 was a sound one in principle. It housed a large amount, approximately 10,000 frozen animals inside, and was to be manned by a very small amount of scientists. The idea was pitched as reintroducing animals to the world in the wake of nuclear war, but good old Vault Tech struck again by hiding the true intention of this vault. It turns out that the true mission of this vault was to actually conduct genetic experiments on the frozen animals. The scientists were tasked with a daily quota of genetic experiment credits that they had to meet, and so were forced, despite their objections, to implement new mutations into animals such as venom glands, cryogenic abilities, and even teleportation, which resulted in animals splicing together horribly. The overseer, Eric DeMarcos, was in charge of making sure that all the other residents met the daily quota. The other residents hated him for it and hated being forced to conduct highly unethical experiments. But what they didn't know is that Eric also hated it as well. He merely acted the way that he did to ensure the survival of his team. In secret, Eric developed a virus to effectively knock the vault's dominating supercomputer out of action, hopefully allowing them to escape. When this was implemented, the computer deployed countermeasures and killed every member of the science team that was left in the vault. Number 10. Vault 106, filled with colorless psychoactive drugs. So what do you do when you pump an isolated vault full of psychoactive drugs for years on end? Well, you get Fallout 3's Vault 106, which is packed full of absolutely insane survivors who've been breathing in that stuff for years. As a result, when the lone wanderer arrives in the vault, it's in a pretty big state of disrepair. Even so, the psychoactive drugs are still being pumped into the vault's atmosphere, which means that when you enter the vault, well, you also get drugged as well. Now, this is signified by the wanderer's vision going blue, and they start to see hallucinations of their father James, as well as apparitions of the tunnel snakes, the bullies from Vault 101. Interestingly, several cut hallucinations from this vault still actually exist within the game's code. It was originally planned to have the vault switch upside down and a strange hallway where the vault dweller would gradually shrink as well. It's a shame that they never made the final build. Number 9. Vault 22. Nature always wins. In New Vegas, when you encounter Vault 22, you'll see that it's quite unlike anything else. In stark contrast to the wasteland around you, Vault 22 is full of abundant green life with plants growing on almost every surface. Turns out that the reason for this is the vault was populated with scientists who specialized in creating crops, which were resistant to disease and drought. After being sealed, they continued on with these experiments, but unfortunately, the scientists went a bit too far. They developed a fungus for pest control purposes, but it had a life of its own, went airborne, and began infecting the vault's population. After many fell ill with a cough, they started to die one by one. But the only problem is that they didn't stay dead. The deceased came back as spore carriers, which are very similar to the infected in Naughty Dog's The Last of Us. The remaining scientists then tried to blow up the infected using gas and fire, but were overwhelmed by the monsters. For those that survived, they trekked out into the wasteland, where they became known as the Coughers, as they were still always coughing after being infected. They also turned to cannibalism soon after, gobbling down on the original inhabitants of Zion Canyon. Number 8. Vault 95, populated by drug addicts and primed to release drugs after 5 years. Now, there's a real problem in the universe of Fallout with people abusing chems, aka drugs. In Fallout 4, Vault 95 was designed to be completely populated by those suffering this addiction. Of course, the difficulties of living underground without a steady supply of drugs were challenging for all of the residents, but what happened after 5 years, well, it's even more screwed up. Vault-Tec's experiment in this case was trying to see what would happen if former addicts were suddenly given access to a huge amount of drugs. As such, after half a decade had passed, a secret agent in the population would open up a large-sized hidden supply of chems and document what happened afterwards. As the chems were revealed, any progress made to live together in harmony was destroyed overnight. Violence erupted across the vault, the chems were taken, and many residents immediately fell off the wagon. Due to the bodies inside, it's believed that most of the population then perished either through violent means or as a result of their addictions. Number 7. Vault 19, Red vs. Blue. Now, this New Vegas vault was all about paranoia. Upon entering the vault, dwellers were assigned a side, red or blue. There were 2 distinct parts of the vault governed over by 2 different overseers, and Vault-Tec did everything in their power to sow mistrust between the 2 different groups. It's widely believed that this was done through subtle means such as subliminal messaging, high noises, weird drafts from vents, and blinking light patterns. The 2 sides blamed the other for this, but in reality, the 2 overseers acting for Vault-Tec were experimenting on both sides to study how paranoia is caused by extreme circumstances. By the time the courier, our protagonist from New Vegas, shows up, the vault is completely abandoned. The actual fate of its citizens has never fully been told. Number 6. Vault 112, the murderous virtual reality simulator. The capital wasteland in Fallout 3 is a horrible place, so you should be thankful that Vault-Tec took you away from all of that and inserted you unwillingly into a virtual reality to escape the horrors from the real world, right? Well, that's exactly what happens in Vault 112. The original residents, of which there could be up to 85, were placed inside of virtual reality pods by the overseer Dr. Brown. Of course, as this is Fallout, the virtual reality isn't the utopia that it's meant to be. You see, Brown goes completely insane and starts to subject his dwellers to significant mental torture, deliberately inventing scenarios in the virtual world where he can kill them mentally, wipe their memory, resurrect them, and do it all over again. By the time the Lone Wanderer arrives at the vault, the experiments have been going on for several decades, and you can strap yourself in for one of the series' most unique and memorable side quests, where you'll find Tranquility Lane, a picturesque American suburb where things get progressively more screwed up as you go on. Number 5. Vault 51, Zach's unit goes out of control. Vault 51, first appearing in Fallout 76, was bound to work right from the start, because everyone knows that putting a semi-sentient computer in charge of proceedings is going to be a good idea, right? I mean, that never goes wrong. Well, Vault 51 is quite unique in the world of Fallout in that it was never designed to have an overseer. Instead, the vault was governed over by a Zach supercomputer, which was given a mission to select a suitable leader from the vault's residents. At the beginning, the residents tried a standard democratic election to find a leader, which ultimately failed when everybody voted for themselves. At this point, Sergeant Robert Baker informed the Zach's computer that leaders are people who step up in times of crisis. Zach's decided to interpret this rather differently and try to make crisis in order to find a leader. It started making social experiments to force its inhabitants to become leaders. These included putting high-class citizens into cramped conditions with nothing but clothing, which forced a resident to go crazy and bomb the vault. But it gets worse from there. Zach started making residents fight through casino games, started withholding food, rigged slot machines to purposefully lose, and even sent out houseflies to drive the population crazy. This all came to a head several years later, ending with violent deaths of all of the residents except Reuben Gill, who then became the overseer and then became an alcoholic due to his extreme isolation. Number 4. Vault 75, Refining Human Genetics and the Parents Executed. Vault 75 appears in Fallout 4 and is located under a school. In 2077, as the nuclear bombs began to fall, everyone who was meant to be in the vault managed to make it in time. This included a lot of children from the school as well as their parents and teachers. But what happens next is extremely dark. The security staff separated the children and the adults and then took the adults for orientation. In reality, they were taken off and killed one by one, leaving behind just the kids. The whole purpose of this vault was to manipulate the gene pool of its residents, using the best and brightest to create stronger, more intelligent humans. The children left behind were then subjected to almost torturous levels of mental and physical testing and conditioned to fear the surface, which was also known as Up Top Land. When a resident turned 18, they graduated from the vault. This meant that for the most part, that their good genes were harvested for future use and then they were killed, while some were drafted into the vault's science team. Anyone else deemed not strong enough, intelligent enough, or without enough air quotes good genes was then executed upon their graduation ceremony as well. Number 3. Vault 87, FEV virus vault where people were exposed to the virus. What better place to conduct your morally questionable experiments than underground in a vault below Fallout 3's capital wasteland? Well, that's exactly what Dr. Wayne Merrick and his team did. The original purpose of Vault 87 was completely scrapped, and Merrick started experimenting with the forced evolutionary virus in order to create humans that were able to survive in the nuclear wasteland. Those poor humans in the vault were dipped into the FEV virus vats, where they re-emerged hideously deformed, dead, or ultimately transformed into super mutants. At some point, a nuclear explosion above the facility caused the test subjects to escape, where they promptly either killed or mutated the remaining human staff. Since that time, the super mutants have reached the surface, where they routinely grab humans and return them to their vault in order to mutate them into more super mutants. Because here's the problem, super mutants are sterile, and the only way to make their species survive is by creating new ones. By the time the Lone Wanderer comes around, the super mutants are running low on the FEV virus and are scouring the capital wasteland to find even more. Number 2. Vault 11. Testing human nature with sacrifice. The Mojave Wasteland's Vault 11 is a grim one. Appearing in Fallout New Vegas, Vault 11 was made to test human nature itself. And how did Vault Tech decide to test this? Well, they told all of the inhabitants of the Vault that every year they must sacrifice one of their number, otherwise the Vault's computer would kill everyone instead. That's bad enough, but the reality of the situation is even worse. The dwellers followed the instructions and sacrificed somebody every single year until there were just 5 of them left. At this point, they decided that they were sick of the sacrifices, and the truth was finally revealed. The computer was never actually going to kill them, and instead they receive a message which states, "Your commitment to human life is a shining example to us all." The door lock of the vault then disengages, letting them all out if they so wish. And that came after countless years of democratically selecting somebody to be slaughtered even though they didn't need to be, which results in most of the remaining dwellers killing themselves. Yeah, pretty grim. And number 1, Vault 108, testing conflicts in leadership and spawning Gary. Appearing in Fallout 3, Vault 108 was designed to invoke conflict amongst its residents by purposely not filling important positions and leaving it to the Vault residents to just do it for themselves. An overseer, Brody Jones, was chosen for the role, but he was destined to die of cancer within 3 years. To make matters worse, the Vault generators were purposefully designed to fail in 20 years' time, and the backup generator would not be sufficient enough to maintain the same levels of power. There were several scientists in this Vault as well, and their story is far more horrifying than its original intended purpose. They started experimenting with cloning technology and began to make clones of a man named Gary, and each of these Garys would end up being hostile to anyone but other clones. Yet, despite this, the scientists soldiered on and created 53 Gary clones before being overwhelmed and presumably killed by this psychotic clone army. By the time the Lone Wanderer arrives at the vault, it's full to the brim with terrifying Gary clones and several wasteland creatures. Gary. And there we go, my friends. That was Fallout ranking every single vault from least to most horrifying. I hope that you enjoyed that, and I know it was a bit of a long vid, so let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. I loved doing stuff like this. I love the Fallout franchise, so if you want to see me cover more Fallout stuff, then just let me know what other suggestions you have, and I will try to make those videos for you, my friend. And if you want to chat to me further, you can do so over on the social medias, over at RetroJ, but the O is a 0 on Instagram and Twitter. Hope to see you over there, my friends. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Hope that you're treating yourself well, my friend. At least a lot better than Vault Tech ever treated its inhabitants, right? And you can start that today by just treating yourself with a bit of love, a bit of self-respect, because you deserve all the best things in life, all right? And do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. You are a massive ledge, and I just want you to live a healthy and happy life. Big love to you. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.